The House of Choices. Detective Dan Thompson had been working on the case for months. A serial kidnapper known as the Trickster had been terrorizing the city, abducting victims and toying with their loved ones by offering them a chance to guess where they were being held. If they guessed right, they'd get to see their loved one again. The sick catch? The kidnapper didn't specify in what condition they'd find them. Dan's life took a dark turn when his own daughter, Emma, went missing. He received a chilling phone call from the Trickster, who offered him the same twisted game. With his heart pounding in his chest, Dan decided to play. He considered the clues he'd gathered over months of investigation and guessed the basement of an abandoned house on the outskirts of town. "Correct!" the Trickster responded with a sinister laugh, and Dan rushed to the location, praying that he'd find Emma alive and well. Upon entering the decrepit basement, Dan discovered his daughter's severed head, her eyes wide open in terror. The kidnapper's voice echoed in his mind. Every other choice would have been correct as well. It was then that Dan understood the horrifying truth. No matter what he'd chosen, the outcome would have been the same. Driven by rage and grief, Dan vowed to hunt down the Trickster and make him pay. His investigation led him to an abandoned warehouse, where he found several rooms, each containing the remains of previous victims. The twisted game was more elaborate than he'd imagined, a labyrinth of false leads and dead ends designed to break the will of those who dared to participate. As Dan ventured deeper into the warehouse, he stumbled upon a room filled with monitors, each displaying a different victim in a unique location. It was here that he encountered the Trickster, a man with cold, lifeless eyes and a sadistic grin. "You've done well, detective," he sneered, "but your journey ends here." With a sudden movement, the Trickster pulled a lever, and the floor beneath Dan gave way, dropping him into a pitch-black pit. He landed on a pile of bones, the remains of the kidnapper's failed players. Overwhelmed by the smell of death and decay, Dan knew he had no choice but to continue the game. He climbed out of the pit and found himself in a dark maze where each turn presented him with another grisly choice. Time and time again, Dan was forced to make impossible decisions, each one bringing him closer to the brink of madness. He knew that if he didn't find a way to outsmart the Trickster, he would become another victim, lost forever in this house of horrors. As Dan moved through the labyrinth, he started to piece together clues that hinted at the kidnapper's identity. Desperation fueled his resolve, and in a final confrontation, he unmasked the Trickster, a former psychiatrist who'd been disbarred for his twisted experiments on his patients. Enraged by Dan's discovery, the Trickster attacked, but Dan managed to overpower him. The detective forced him to confront the horror of his own actions, and the Trickster, unable to bear the weight of his sins, took his own life. The warehouse was demolished, the gruesome game brought to an end, but the scars it left behind were indelible. Dan Thompson would never forget the price he paid to solve the case, and the city would forever remember the terror of the House of Choices.